All right.
Do you want me to sit over there, or do you want me
Yeah.
I can do it over here?
I'll move it around.
Otherwise, the people are really watching me looking at the side of my face. Fine with that.
Yeah.
Sorry?
Yeah.
Okay, Bruchim Habayim, Shavua Tov, the beginning of the last week of Chodesh Adar, the happiest week of the year, B'ezrat Hashem Yitbarach. Shekach to Moshe, everyone wants to toil in setting up the Suda, which was dead on with picking my favorite colors, Shekach. I guess before starting, I should mention that the shir tonight and the meal is sponsored by the Pell family in memory of Josh's great-grandmother, Lilu Nishmas Miriam Bas Harav Shlomo Cohen. B'ezrat Hashem and Neshama should have. Okay. So before we get into the connection and the time and living the times between Purim and Pesach, I want to be discussing the principle itself, which is Chagim in Judaism are really meant to be tapped into. They're not just to be celebrated by remembering the past, rather they're meant to be lived in the present. What does that mean to be lived in the present? Each and every Chag has its own special nature, has its own koach, has its own essence. And what we're meant to do when we get to that Chag is to try to tap it and to live that essence. There's a theory of time that the Maral Miprad puts forth, which views time very, very differently than what usually we're used to understand. Most people understand time as linear. And Hashem created the world back 5,778 years ago. Right? There was the Briat Olam, 7 days, and then there was Rishon, afterwards there was Noah, and then there was Avram, the Avos, and there was Mitzrayim, and there's the story of Shavuos, and Chulei until our days. And when we celebrate Purim, right, so we're going back in time, right, 2,500 years ago, and we're remembering something happened 2,500 years ago. We're celebrating Pesach, we're going back 1,000 years ago, right? And we're remembering something that happened 3,000 years ago. But if you think about it, we know from davening that that's not really the case. Another couple of weeks, it's going to be Pesach. Right? We're going to say Zman Chirutenu. What does it mean Zman Chirutenu? It's the time of our freedom. We don't say it's the Zman of the Chirut of the people of Bnei Yisrael that live 2.5 hours. Zman Chirutenu is the time of our freedom. Shavuos is Zman Matan Torotenu. Right? Sukkos. It's Zman Simchatenu, on the Reis level, the Rabbanim, we know Purim, the Simcha that we experienced just a week ago. So how does it, the Maral says that time is in fact a cycle. It's circular. Meaning, it's not that every 7 days you celebrate Shabbos, on day 7, 14, 21, 28, 35, until the coming Mashiach. But there's a cycle of 7 days, and on the 7th day what we do is we come back to that exact same point in time, we come back to Shabbos. Same thing with Pesach. The calendar goes around 354 days, and what we do every year when we get to Tetvav Nissan, we're there back in the exact same place, the exact same Zman. There's that koach in the air, there's a nature in the air that we have to tap into. And each time has a different koach. And our job in each chag is to try to uncover the essence and to be able to connect to it, to live our lives in the present based on the original seeds that were sown in the past, but to live them in the present and to connect to Hashem, to connect to each other in that given nature. Now, that's always a difficult thing to do, but it's particularly difficult in the time that we find ourselves right now, which is in between Chagim. Because everyone knows, okay, Purim has a certain nature, Pesach has a certain nature, Shavuos has a certain nature. But what do you do in the off time, in the off season, right? When you're in between Chagim, what's the nature of those days? How are we meant to understand and how are we meant to capitalize on the opportunities of the times that we're living in right now in a way that we're able to tap our future? And so what I'd like to do in the shit today is talk a little bit about Purim, connect to Pesach, and by doing so, seeing exactly where we stand in between Purim and Pesach and what these days could and should be to us and how we can be living our lives. So let's get started in B'ezrat Hashem, recognizing that Purim and Pesach in many ways are acts. If Chodesh Bezallah come Rosh Hashanah, we're in Shabbos, Chodesh coming Rosh Chodesh itself, Rosh Chodesh this year. It's the beginning of the year. And Pesach is the very, very first time of the calendar. So the Purim is very, very last. Now it's the time they focus on the nature. And Pesach will celebrate the miracles of Hashem. Right? the revealed miracles. Or it comes to the Torah, it's exactly this time. It's the hidden miracles of Hashem. Purim is the Chag of Hashem saving us in the Ghost. Pesach is the Chag of Hageula. The Gemara of Hashem says that Daf Yud Aleph, when Nissan Yigalu, when Nissan Atid Nigel. So it's not only trying to figure out a time that was in between two different types, but in many ways two opposite types. So before we get into the story of Purim itself and the rest of it, I think to get a deeper understanding of the Megillah, it's necessary to take a step back and to try to understand a little bit of the historical setting. The historical setting, by understanding the historical setting of the story of Esther, you have a deeper appreciation of the story. And it's common knowledge that the Megillah Esther took place during the Persian time. After the Purim on the first place of English, for the 7 years that the Israel are in exile, that's Babel. Okay, the Persians, the Babylonians, they take over as the rulers for power. And one of the goals of Hashem, of all the Persians, the beginning of the Megillah, 127. What's not always taken into account is the fact that the story of the Megillah actually takes place after Am Yisrael already began building the second base of English. If you look in the first source you have, if you look in the first Makor, in the very beginning of Sefer Ezra, the pasuk says, "B'shat achad Koresh melech paras lechlo devar Hashem mepi Yirmiyah." Here Hashem had ruach Koresh melech paras v'yaver kol malchuto v'gam b'mechtav lemor. Also Torah Sheba'al Peh, also Torah Shebechtav, sent out the entire Malchus. Such an interesting formulation of Ezra. K'amar Koresh melech paras. Kol mamlachot haaretz natani Hashem Elokei Hashemayim. Hu pakad alai lebno lo bayit b'Yisrael asher b'Yehuda. So says Koresh melech paras. In Divrei Hayom we have the same pasuk, and there it says Kol amar Koresh Mishicho. It's like the Mashiach of Hashem. He's the Shluach of Hashem. Hashem gave me all the mamlachot of the land. He's the God of the Shemayim, and He told me that my job is to build the base of Yerushalayim. Whoever wanted to go on the Hashem, Hashem should be with him. He should go up to Yerushalayim, Yehuda, but even a Beit Hashem. Okay, so Hashem should go ahead and build the base of English. Now, the mission of going ahead and building the base of English, as we see in the continuation of Sefer, is led by Zerubbabel, and it's already underway at the time that Achashverosh inherits the throne. Now, realizing that adds additional meaning, right, to Chazal's condemnation of the Jews in the time of Shushan. What happens in Shushan? Bnei Yisrael participate, right, in the Suda of Achashverosh. If you look at the Gemara on the Gilon Daf Yud Ben Amar Aleph, you have the source bet. Shalu Talmid David and Bishum Ben Yochai. B'neiman etchayvu sonehem shel Yisrael shebato ador kiluyah. Why was it that the Sonim of Yisrael, Shloshim Tzad Yinorim, right, saying why were the haters of the Jews? Why was Klal Yisrael? Why was Klal Yisrael Zochem, and why were they deserving of being destroyed? Right, that there's a decree against them. Right, the entire Jewish people, men, women, children, etc. So Shlomo Yochai answers his Talmidim, Amar Lahem Ablotem. Good question. Why don't you say the answer by yourself? Because they benefited from the Suda of the Rasha. Now, what was the Suda that Achashverosh was celebrating? What was the Suda that Achashverosh was celebrating? He was making a big feast. Moshe?
Beat the Greeks.
Achashverosh did beat the Greeks. That
Hashem had forgotten Jewish people.
That Hashem had forgotten the Jewish people. Why? Because he did a cheshbon. And what was the cheshbon? That the Nevi'im tell us that we're going to go to Galus for how many years? 70 years. The 70 years already passed. And here the base of English still isn't rebuilt. So now if we understand, based on the historical setting, the bikorat, the criticism that Chazal have of Am Yisrael, meaning not only are they apathetic about moving back to Eretz Yisrael and rebuilding the base of Mikdash, but they have no problem participating in the feast that's celebrating the fact that it wasn't built. Meaning in the eyes of the Jewish people living in Shushan, what do they say to themselves? There's no need to change. I mean, why do we have to waste our time going to Yerushalayim and rebuilding the capital, the Birah in Yerushalayim? We're already living in the capital. What's the capital? Shushan HaBirah. So it's satiric that the Megillah keeps referring to Shushan, Shushan HaBirah. Shushan's the capital. Because what's really the capital? Yerushalayim HaBirah. And here the Jews are in Shushan. They're moving on with their lives. They're fine. They have no problem joining a feast as long as they give out free shawarmas, right? They're with Achashverosh, right? The shtiyas, kadat, the din, ain't no nice. They can drink as much as they want, and it doesn't bother them at all. understanding the historical setting also explains a very peculiar halacha that we know that's till this day in the Hilchos of Megillah. Okay? The halachas in the Rambam, it's also passed halacha Shulchan Aruch. I brought it here from based on the Gemara, but I brought it here in the Rambam. If you look at source Gimel, Hilchos Megillah, Perek Aleph, Lachol Dalet through Hey, the Rambam says, Eihu Zman Kriyata. Right, when's the time of reading the Megillah? So everyone knows Manim Harbei Tiknulah Chachamim Shenar B'Zmanehem. There are many different times opening Sugya of the Megillah. ואלו הן זמני קריאתה, מדינה שהייתה מוקפת חומה בימי יהושע בן נון, בארץ שהם מחוץ לארץ, אף על פי שאין עכשיו חומה, קוראים ב-15 באדר, ומדינה זו נקראת כרך. Basically, it says any city that had a wall at the time of Yeshua ben Nun, whether it's an Eretz Yisrael or Eretz, even though now it doesn't have a wall around it, reads on the 15th of Adar, and such a country or city is known as a krach. Any city that did not have a wall around the time of Yeshua, even though now it is, Purim until the 14th, and then the exception is Shushan Abira, because even though it didn't have a wall at the time of Yeshua, since the miracle happened there, they read there as well. Okay? Now the words of the Rambam are based on the Mishnah and the Gemara, are passing halacha l'maisa and orachaim and siman tafresh pechet. But the obvious question is, why is the deciding time that determines whether it's an ir or whether it's a krach, why is it defined by the time of Yeshua? L'chor makes no sense, right? When should we think that? What should be the determining factor if it's a city, a walled city, or not walled city? During the time of the Megillah, right? Because that's when the story happened. The entire Megillah is written the story Purim, so I should say very simple. Any city like Shushan that has a walled city, the 15th, anyone that's not. And what's the determining time? The determining time is the story of Purim. But halacha l'maisa has nothing to do with the story of Purim, to the extent that there's a havamina that even Shushan won't read on Shushan Purim, because Shushan didn't have a walled city during the time of Yeshua ben Nun, so there's an exception. We say we do. But as a principle, the rule is the time of Yeshua ben Nun. The question is why? And the Rambam himself, in the continuation of halacha, how you have in the source Dalet, asks that same question. V'lama tlu hadavar b'mei Yeshua kidei lachlok kavod l'Eretz Yisrael שהייתה חרבה באותו הזמן כדי שיהיו קוראים כבני שושן ויחשבו כאילו הם כרכים המוקפים חומה אף על פי שנעתה חרבים הואיל והיו מוקפים בימי יהושע ויהיה זכרם לארץ ישראל בני זה. He says, why is it dependent on the time of Yeshua? Says the Rambam, in order to give kavod to Eretz Yisrael. Because at the time of the story of Megillas Esther, what did Eretz Yisrael look like? Not like it looks like today. It was desolate, it was destroyed, it was abandoned. So it says, and then they'll think of themselves, remember the good old days when we used to, in these same cities that were right now, they were built up, and there were walls around them, etc., etc. Even though now they're destroyed, because they were surrounded by walls in times of Yeshua, as a zikaron to Eretz Yisrael, even in this miracle that was in Kos. Okay. So the bottom line, according to the Rambam, the reason that the determining date, the time of the city being walled, in order to be kover the reading on the 15th, is kavod of Eretz Yisrael. But based on what we saw up until now in the historical setting, you can take it one step further. Meaning, in addition to giving kavod to Eretz Yisrael, Mordechai and Esther are trying to teach Am Yisrael a lesson. And a lesson which Am Yisrael desperately needs to hear. Meaning the focus of the Torah, the focus of halacha is where? Is not in Shushan. Shushan is not the determining factor. The time now is not the determining factor. The focus is Eretz Yisrael. But it's more than that. Not only are they setting the time of Eretz Yisrael, but they're setting it the time of Eretz Yisrael, the time of Yeshua ben Nun. Who was Yeshua ben Nun?
And the Jews physically in the land of Israel.
Yeshua ben Nun was, right? Obviously, also in terms of Ruchnius and the Beis Medrash and Masorah, right? Moshe Kilo Torah, Har Sinai, Masrali Yeshua. But Yeshua was the first Ramakal, was the first general, the Jewish army that led them into conquering Israel. I mean, the first time they come into Eretz Yisrael to establish the state and to go ahead and to build the first base of Mikdash, it all starts with Yeshua taking them in. He took them in the first time around. So the idea of setting the Megillah and the dates of reading from the time of Yeshua Nun is an attempt to constantly remind Am Yisrael that just like Yeshua, they have the opportunity now to return to Eretz Yisrael to take it back. To show B'nai Yisrael how Yiddishkeit, how it was meant to be lived by Hageula, by returning and re-establishing Eretz Yisrael as a center of the Jewish life around the base of Mikdash. Okay? So if so, it's say that in between the lines, Shushan Abira, right, opposed to Yerushalayim Abira, the deal that B'nai Yisrael could have gotten back, criticism that they participated in the feast of Ashverosh. The halacha, as we pass, that things are said not based on the time of Shushan, but based on the time of Yoshua, in which between the lines is criticism to Am Yisrael for not returning to Eretz Yisrael. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives Bnei Yisrael opportunity for the Gula to come back, return to Eretz Yisrael, build the Beis HaMikdash, but Bnei Yisrael are not interested. And one of the Rishonim takes this idea and develops it to an extreme, I think. You take a look in source Hay, you have the Kuzari, very, very famous piece of the Kuzari from the second Har. I'm not going to read the whole thing inside. For the shir, I imagine most of you had a chance to see it. The Chaver mentions all different types of things about Eretz Yisrael. He said there's a lot of talk about the importance of Eretz Yisrael. And the Melech of the Kuzari says, tell me a little bit about what you remember, about how special Eretz Yisrael is, all the things that Chazal spoke about in the Shabbat and the praise of Eretz Yisrael. So the Chaver brings all kinds of memos of Chazal about the importance of Eretz Yisrael. I recommend looking at them inside afterwards if you're not familiar. And then Gimel, the Melech Kuzar challenges the Chaver, Hageula. He says, Im Kain, on source Hay, the Piskal that says Chavkin. Im Kain, Alvera Tam Mitzvat HaMechayev Lefi Torah Chaim, Encha Olei Lamakom Hahu, as if so, you're transgressing an obligatory mitzvah according to your very own Torah. Because the conversation that we're having right now, the entire Kuzari, after the beginning, right, is a dialogue between this Goyish king that eventually ends up converting to Judaism at the end of the story with all those people, right, and the Chaver. At the beginning, he was looking for, everyone in the story, looking for a religion. There's this dream that you have good intentions or your actions aren't good. He falls in, right, a Muslim, a Christian, he speaks to everyone, but he doesn't find evidence in any of them. And since they all quote the Jew, he says, okay, I'll call it a Jew, and then the whole conversation is being with Chaver. So the Malchus says, the conversation we're having here is in Europe. You're telling me all about the importance of Eretz Yisrael, so what are you doing here? You're transgressing your very own Torah. If you don't go ahead and make Aliyah to that place, and you don't make it a place where you're going to live and you're going to die, you say to Hashem, your God, to have mercy on Sion, because it's the place of your life. You believe the Shekhinah is going to come back there? They're all Jews around the world, right? They all facing down, they always to Eretz Yisrael, from Eretz Yisrael to Yerushalayim. It's Makom Alil Regel. He says, if so, every time you're mishtachaveh, you bow down, you down with Hashem. He says, it's all baloney. You're doing something externally, but you're not for real. It's an avodah, she'ein b'chavanah, it's something on the inside. Your avotechem harishonim, hayu orach ladur baha, yoter miv'chosh shkolotam. Says all of your forefathers chose to live in Eretz Yisrael. They preferred living there, even as Gerim. They would have felt more comfortable because they would have felt more in their own comfort zone. Elsewhere in Chutzlaretz, but no, even as Gerim, they wanted to come there to Israel. Even though there was no Shekhinah there, and Hashem didn't reveal himself yet there. There was all the Avodah Zarah and the Gili Orayos. They wanted to cling to Israel. Even when there was a Shnat B'tzorah, when there was a Rav, we know they'd only be able to without permission from Hashem. So how are you sitting here in Europe? That's what the Melech Kuzar says to the Chaver, who delivered. So one of the most famous sentences in the Kuzari, in the beginning of Hakotel, he says, really, you uncovered my embarrassment, the king of the Kuzar. He says, I'm speechless, I have nothing to say. Because you're right. So what can I answer? But a Jew, even when he's speechless, he always has something to say. So he still says something. He says, says, you're right. Right, you're right. I have no good excuse, but you should know misery enjoys company. I'm not the only one that made a mistake. He says, this sin is the reason why the destiny that Hashem planned for the second base, as the pasuk says, that Hashem's going to come and dwell amongst you, never came to fruition. Meaning, when you read the Tanakh, right, when you read the Navi Machronim, you read Yeshayahu, you read Yirmiyahu, you read Chesed, there's no talk of a third base of Mikdash. They're supposed to go to Gola 7 years, they're supposed to come back. The second base of Mikdash had the potential to be the Mashiach, and that would be the end. They were getting a little bit of a flick, 70 years, right? 70 years is a long time from the perspective of a person. Right? We're about to be 70 years of Midan Yisrael, another couple of months, right? But from the perspective of a nation, perspective of history, 70 years isn't all that long. And so they were going to come back, they were build a base of Mikdash, they would live happily ever after. But what went wrong? So look what he says. The Shechina was meant to come back in the second base of English, just like in the first base of English. If they would have come back to Eretz Yisrael, if they would have longed to come back, they would have come back out of desire. That's if they would have. Right, this taps back into what we're talking about in the exact time of the Megillah, where they chose to stay there. Says the Kuzari, only very few came back. Anyone know what the historians say? What percentage of the Jewish people came back and have a second message? 10%. 10%. 90% stay in Gauls. Rubam, not only quantitative, but chashuvim shebeh, the upper class and the middle class. The majority of them qualitatively, nisharu b'Bavel. Only the poor, lower classes came back. The majority of them stayed in Bavel. Maskimim l'galut. They agreed in Galus. They weren't forced against them. They decided to stay in the Galus. Ulashivud, and he says why? Uvilvad, look 4 lines down. Uvilvad shelo yifradu mishkanotam umaskehem. Because they didn't want to leave behind their beautiful homes that they had in Chutz La'aretz. They didn't leave behind their whole businesses in Chutz La'aretz. So they decided to willingly stay in the Galus, even though they had the opportunity to come back to Eretz Yisrael. So if this is only a small portion came back on the Shalem. And he says, therefore, Hashem didn't connect me. Hashem says, it's a very important line in terms of Ruchanis in general. It says, God's Siyat Shemaya only comes on a person. He sends a person prepares himself. The person wants a little, Hashem will give him a little. The person wants a lot, Hashem will give him a lot. So if it all would come back, they would have the ultimate Geula. But since only 10% came back, they only had 10% Geula. 2, and he says, therefore, you're right, every single thing that we say in our davening, it's just like a parakeet, just repeating words. Lo kavanah lev, we're saying these things. So according to the Kuzari, okay, as we said, the reason the ultimate Geula, ultimate potential, wasn't actualized in time to say this back to Midrash, is because Am Yisrael chose to stay in the Galus. In order for the complete Geula to happen, what does Am Yisrael need to do? They need to get involved. They have to take Hashem up on the offer. When the Geula comes, what does Hashem do first? Hashem opens up the door and says, Baruch haba. You're welcome. Rolls out the red carpet for us. You're welcome to come to Eretz Yisrael. But he's not going to pick us up and force against our will. The door is open. We have to walk in. And the problem for the Jews that were living in Shushan is, now taking that historic setting into account, let's get into Megillah. Okay? I think the one common denominator in the many different Perushim of the Megillah, many different, a large variety of explanation. Each one of the different Perushim of the Megillah teaches us a different lesson, has a different message of how to live our lives. I think there's one common denominator of all the different explanations of the Megillah. And that's that the key to understanding the Megillah isn't on the surface, but it's beneath the surface. Because when you read the Megillah, what do you have? You have a nice story. Right? And all of a sudden, in the middle of the story, there's a drastic change of circumstances, which allows the underdog to prevail. It's a story that has nothing to do with Hashem. Everyone knows that Hashem's name is mentioned in the Megillah. But obviously, it can't be just some random, secular story. Because if so, there's by no means that Chazal would have put Megillah Esther into the Tanakh, nor would they establish the Chag Purim. So we know that's something foolish. And the Kiddush of Purim is that recognizing that even when he's not at the surface in any ways, means that, right, of course, he's not there. You don't see him on the surface. He's to believe that Hashem is involved in everything in the world, and when he's not on the surface, he's beneath the surface. Well, this idea, I think, is summarized best by the Gemara in Chulin and Daf Kuflam and Tenamun that you have in source above. The Gemara there asks, Esther min Torah minayin, right? What's the source for Esther from the Torah? Obviously, not a little bit, what's the hint? So the Gemara answers, Anochi Hester Astir, right? That Hashem is going to hide himself from Israel. This idea of Hester Panim, of Hashem, Hester Panim doesn't mean Hashem's not there, right? You play hide and go seek with a little kid, so the kid sees you're not there, and he thinks it's a hysterical thing. So you're not there, you're there. But anyone that's looking from the side that understands what's going on, like, what's the big deal? Hashem's there all the time, right? Hashem's always there, is that not there? But he's Hester Panim. He's hiding himself. He's beneath the surface. He's not on the surface. So when we read the Megillah, we don't see Hashem. Who's mentioned in the Megillah time after time again? Hamelech. Right? Hamelech. And the Sfarim of the Primiut of the Torah, and Star, Kabbalah, Hasidut, etc., say that behind the word Melech or Hamelech in the Megillah is none other than Melech, Malchei Malchei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He's hiding. It's not by chance a lot of them in the Hageula we have on Purim, all involved in things that aren't on the surface and hiding. The idea of wearing costumes, the idea of being hamantashen, right, where the inside is stuffed in the inside. It's not like the chocolate chips on the outside, it's stuffed in the inside. And in Europe, I don't know if anyone at home had been hugging for the grandparents in kreplach on Purim. Those that know what kreplach is, where again the meat's hidden on the inside. That's the idea of the Nissan. Okay. Now, in certain ways, it's easier to understand the Megillah when a Kadosh Baruch Hu is not part of the story. Because if a Kadosh Baruch Hu is not a part of the story, then people, what do they want to do? But once I understand that Hashem's part of the story, then I have a very serious question I have to ask myself, which is, how does Haman have the right? Why does Hashem allow Haman to persecute the Jewish people? Right? I think somehow Haman wins over HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he convinces HaKadosh Baruch Hu to get his approval, not the Jewish people, men, women, and children. Right? It's very nice that we're going to thank Hashem for saving us in Purim. But if we want to be honest for a moment, 1 second, Hashem saving us, but it's also Hashem who allows someone in the first place to go ahead and persecute us. So what we want to learn together is a piece in the Svarim that they have in the bottom half, the second half of the sheet. But before we get into the Svarim itself, let's take a step back before we talk about Haman and talk about Haman's roots, Haman's essence. Who does Haman come from? Haman comes from Amalek. Who's Amalek in the world? Amalek is a nation that represents the antithesis of Am Yisrael. Why? Because our job as a nation is to be Mekadesh Shem Hashem Olam, it's to spread the name of God in the world. And the idea of the Amalek is the exact opposite. They're around and they constantly come in the way and they try to confuse matters. They try to hide the name of Hashem. And therefore we have a mitzvah to go ahead and to destroy their nemesis. We have a mitzvah to go ahead and destroy Amalek. In an extreme way. One doesn't understand the depth of the Torah. They look at it very quickly, especially when they look at it through the lenses right, of the Western world. They say it's an immoral thing. We come along, you change it, and you wipe them out completely. How could it be? We have a mitzvah to go ahead to remember and never forget what Amalek did to us. We have something in front of us, and source Zions, of course, Amalek, and there it's a time in Mitzrayim, etc., etc. But what was so bad? What did Amalek do so bad? So they attacked us. There were many nations that attacked us over the generations. What did they do so bad? The answer is connected to Amunah. Meaning, what happens when Vanessa leaves Mitzrayim? Vanessa leaves Mitzrayim. We said at the beginning of the show that the story of Pesach and the story of our opposites. In Purim, everything's hidden. In Mitzrayim, everything's revealed. Everyone sees Hashem, the hand of Hashem in the Tanakos, in Kriyas Yamsuf. No one wants. I'm supposed to force to be reckoned with. No one wants to mess with them. Everyone sees that they have Hashem on his side. But they saw marching on their way to Eretz Yisrael. On the way, they're stopping at Har Sinai, takeaway, right? They're stopping at Har Sinai, they're taking the Sefer Torah, they're supposed to march into Eretz Yisrael and establish the kingdom of Hashem, not the Kadosh. And precisely at that moment, Amalek comes and boom, attacks. As Rashi explains, if it wasn't for Amalek, no other nation would dare mess with Am Yisrael. And not messing with Am Yisrael is not just messing with Am Yisrael. They wouldn't mess with Hashem, they wouldn't mess with the Torah. No one would have messed with belief in the existence of Hashem. Because at that time, the belief in Hashem was too strong to be doubted. It was clear to the whole world that this is the derech, this is emes, this is right. And no one would start up with us. We have it here, I imagine everyone remembers the famous Rashi in Source Chet. What does it mean, Asher Korcha B'derech? We'll come back to the first explanation in a moment. The second one is Lashon Kor, the chom, of cold. And he brings the mashal, the boiling bath. And no human being could dare step into the water. So as soon as you get into it, you'll get burnt. One crazy lunatic jumps into the water. He himself gets burnt. But what does he succeed in doing? He cools off the bath for others. That was Amalek. They jump in, they cool off the bath for everyone else. Once they come to this junction, they leave Am Yisrael vulnerable for future attacks. But not just as a nation physically vulnerable for attacks. Also religiously. Also philosophically, in terms of Munah. As the Pasuk says, at that time, Asher Korcha B'derech, right? You weren't fearing of God. And how does Amalek succeed in doing this? And this is the first Lashon of Rashi. Asher korcha b'derech. What does Rashi say? Asher korcha b'derech, the big source that? Lashon mikre. What does mikre mean?
Chance.
By chance. Everyone remembers that mikre, that the Lashon of the Gematria of Amalek, also Sateh. Amalek says everything is by chance. Now, Amalek is very, very clever. We all have a bit of Amalek inside us. What does Amalek do? Amalek doesn't come to you and say, Aaron, God doesn't exist. Because if you would have an Yisrael that would come to you and say, God doesn't exist, you'd say, it's a bunch of nonsense, I'm not listening. More even, Amalek would come and say, don't keep Shabbos. It's not relevant, it's not serious. God, normal Jew, you know what I'm saying? It's not a guy. He's not going to throw away all religion. But Amalek's very clever. Amalek comes and proposes a very, very simple question. Maybe not. Who says? That's the question of Amalek. Something. Amalek, they happened upon us. Things happened by chance. You said that there was this entire thing that God behind everything is entire Mahal and Hashem's behind the story of Megillah Esther. Amalek's not going to say, he says, maybe not. Maybe not. Amalek has the flag, opposed to what we believe in, that everything that will happen for a reason, and everything's connected to Hashem, and Hashem. Amalek comes and waves the flag of chance. The things are just by chance. They represent the belief in the world that there's no Achdus Hashem, there's no unity of Hashem that unites the world. Rather, they're random coincidences that just happen to happen. Now let's go back to the Megillah. The Sfemet explains the essence of Purim by returning to this very point. What was Haman's claim? What does Haman claim against the Jewish people? What's his claim? He claims to Hashem, to wipe it out. Because again, on the surface, his whole discussions with what king? Achashverosh. But beneath the surface, who's he talking to? Hashem. So if you look at the bottom, or maybe let's first start with the pasuk. The pasuk is in source text. Seder Perek Gimel Halacha Chet. ויאמר המן למלך אחשוורוש, ישנו עם אחד מפוזר ומפורד בין העמים בכל מדינות מלכותך ותהן שונות מכל עם ואת דתי המלך אינם עושים ולמלך אין שווה להניחם. So Haman says to Achashverosh, and we said he's talking more than just Achashverosh, there's one nation which is mufuzar mufurad ben amim. What does it mean mufuzar mufurad? Mufuzar means scattered, and mufurad means divided. Being true to his use, what does Haman do? He points out the division, the malokes within Am Yisrael. Look at the Sfas Emes there on the bottom. Let's look at Vav. He says all the koach of Haman. I mean, the claim that he makes, in which he succeeded in convincing Hashem that Bnei Yisrael are disturbing or being destroyed, is by saying that they're a nation which is divided. There's no achdus in uniformity. Now again, the uniformity of Amunah of Hashem, believing that everything in the world is connected to Hashem, and the uniformity of achdus of Klal Yisrael, the Ben Amnon Chaveru, are very, very connected. Why? Because only when Klal Yisrael are one do we have the ability to serve our function as the Amanif. Right? The tefillah that we say in Yeshiva, the Nusach Sfar, that Nusach Ashkas, we don't know what the Chazan is saying, so we kind of just wait a few seconds until it's done. But it's showing reading it inside, especially the translation in English ones. It's a beautiful, beautiful Kigah, there right before Baruch and Allah Shabbat. As of the Shabbos, the secret of Shabbos is one. The secret of Shabbos is what we say that there's the throne of Hashem, and Hashem can't sit on his throne in this world until the throne's one. Right? Imagine the king wants to sit down on the chair, the little pieces. We're the throne of Hashem in the world. So when we come together as one, then Hashem could sit on his throne, and could Hashem be brought into this world? Only when do we have that privilege to fulfill our mission as being a Mlechem Hagoy Kadosh. So Haman's claim to say that we're an Am Mefurad shakes up our worlds. Am Yisrael is scattered. There's no Achdus. Therefore, they need to be destroyed. And Hashem listens. Now, there's a difference between Mefuzar and Mefurad. If you look at the Svanema back where we left off, by Vav there, he says, Bemet HaPizur Hu L'Tovah. After the fact that we're scattered is a good thing. For all Bnei Yisrael to be exactly the same, to live in a ghetto, to live in the walls of one place, is not good. Because so our job is to go ahead and broadcast the name of Hashem in the world. So he says there's an Indian being scattered. We have to go ahead and gather the different sparks of Kedusha that can be found everywhere. To be scattered is a good thing. For Jews to be different, and there be all different types of Jews, right? And one Jew to wear a blue shirt, another one to wear a green shirt, another one to wear a green shirt, and one to wear a sweater with a... It's all good. They have different kind of cultures, different videos, different types, everything. As long as we're L'Shem Shemayim and we're working together in unison, there's achdus. That's great. The problem is that only mefuzar ben adam, but they're mefurad ben adam, and that's the real thing. Mefurad says the Sfaradim. This is the lowness. We have to be one, even though we're different. When Israel comes to Mitzrayim, it says shivim nefesh. So why does it say shivim nefesh? It says shivim nefashot, plural. Rashi says shivim nefesh, right? That they're as if they're one. They're together. When there's no longer achdos, that's what brings the goals. Okay. So that's Haman's claim against Amisrael. And Hashem says, you know what, Haman, you're right. Bnei Yisrael are really divided. And since they're divided, they don't have the right to exist. Now, once we understand that Bnei Yisrael's machlokes and its division is the allegation they're being tried for, now we're able to understand throughout the continuation of the Megillah the heavy emphasis that's placed on Achdus. Esther wants to fight against the decree that's incumbent on the Jewish people. So what should tell Mordechai? Look in Perek, source Yud. What does Esther tell Mordechai? Lech knos et kol Yehudim. What does it mean, knos et kol Yehudim? Gather them together. And in Tzimah Shusham, it's something like that. Ubechein avor lamelech. I'm only going to come to the melech. Who's the melech? I'm going to go daven. I'm going to be the shliach tzibur. I'm going to go ahead and pray for my life and our life. B'shir avadati avadati in front of Hashem. But I can only stand in front of Hashem and daven for Hashem to have rachmanas on the Jewish people if what? In lech knos and kol Yehudim. Right? If we're going to come together. There's a need to do tshuva to bring them back to being one. Haman's claim is true. And to reverse the decree, Hashem, Amisrael has to negate the claim. And therefore, time and time again, we hear about Achas in the Megillah. For instance, when Bnei Yisrael stand to defend themselves, look in Perek Tet, towards the end of the Megillah, you have in source Yud Aleph, V'shar Yehudim Hashem nikalu, v'amar al nafsham, v'noch moed bahem, v'arag v'samahem, chamisha v'shivim elef, v'vizal al shachot yadam. When Bnei Yisrael go to fight for themselves, it could just say, amar al nafsham, but that's not what it says. It says, nikalu. They gather together. They come together to be one. The same idea of the Achdus. The Sfat Emet really knocks the point home hard at the very beginning of the piece. If you look at Aleph, the Sfat Emet writes, Ikar HaYeshuah b'Purim nesal yedei HaKinus kemo shekatuv knos kedim v'chtiv nikalu v'amod ha'nafsham. Okay? It says the Ikar of the Yeshua. You want to know why we zocha to the salvation? Why we zocha to the salvation? It's because we have the Achas and we came together. The Zohar writes Yisrael v'orayt achad, that the Torah and Am Yisrael are one. And the Pachad Yitzchak Rav Hutner, in his third inyan on the Purim, he develops the idea and he says that the process of being Makabel the Torah ends up being the same exact process, right? The same exact blueprint, the process of the Geula. What happens when they saw Makabel the Torah? So everyone knows the psukim, right? Look in the Shemot, beginning of Perek Yud, source Yud, Vayistum Refidim, Vayavom B'Bar Sinai, V'Yachanu V'Midbar, V'Yichan Sham Yisrael Neged Har. I put the Rashi, imagine it, right? V'Yichan Sham Yisrael. Should say V'Yichan. It's plural. Should say V'Yichanu. Rashi says Yishachad B'Leilecha. They come together in one. In order to be Makabel the Torah, there needs to be Achdus. Now, L'chora, the exact same thing happens in the story of Purim. There's another pasuk that interestingly the Sfat Emet doesn't mention. If you look in the source Yud Daled, pasuk Perek Tet pasuk Chav Zayin, there everyone knows Kimu B'Kiblu, right? The Kimu B'Kiblu. Kimu B'Kiblu Yehudim Alehem Alehem Alehem. The Kimu B'Kiblu is very much parallel to Kabbalas Torah. The Gemara and Shabbos, that Pechet, I didn't put it on the sheet, but the Gemara and Shabbos talks about the Kafel and Hagigit that Hashem held the mountain over the heads to force it to the Kabbalah Torah. And then we say, if so, there's all the Araisas, and they always have an excuse. It was a it was forced against them, it was Ma'oris. They never willingly agreed. So the Gemara says no, because Ador Kiblu and Achashverosh, they returned the time of Achashverosh, they received the Torah again. How do I know? Because it says Kiblu Kiblu. I mean, there's two Kabbalas of Torah. The Kabbalas of Torah was by force in Shemot, then when they left Mitzrayim, and then the Kabbalas of Torah was Simcha, Ba'ava, the Ratzon. It was done in the time of Purim. Just like Yisrael and Midbar, Vayichan Sham Yisrael Kishon Hakotel was Atos, so too here. What does the pasuk says? Kimu B'Kiblu. Kiblu is written in what? Look carefully. It's spelled the kibel, it's singular. Vayicha, kibu, vit, kiblu. So it's written, it's almost as if it says, there was an achas again. So on the surface, it's the same. But there's a big difference. Because the idea of gathering the Bnei Yisrael in the midbar to be with Hakotel Torah, whose initiative was it? Hashem. How do we know?
He told us to go.
Different. If you look in the summarized law in the Var, Heradalia, source Tedvav, one of the 6 things that they're met every single day, right? So there we say, Raki Shamachar, not to forget what happened. Yom Hashem Hashem Al-Kech B'chorei, but more Hashem Elai, Hakeli et Amazet, to call them together. That Hashem told us. But who's the one that called Bnei Yisrael together in the story of Esther, of Purim? Esther, right? She brings them all together. It's different. And therefore, the Sfar Hamas continues in Peace in the Van of Bet. V'zel b'chinat Torah shebapeh. Ki Torah k'tiv hakeli et ha'ashim et dvarai. He says, gather them together, and I will show them their words. V'haya kila b'tzivoy kadosh baruch hu Hashem initiative. V'kan nikalu ba'atzmam. Here, they got together by themselves. V'ador kiblu b'me'achashverosh b'koach hakila. By the coming together, by the kihila. That's how there's all. לכן קיבל היהודים לשון, he does say, קיבל היהודים לשון יחיד, קיבלו היהודים, but it's לשון יחיד שנשאו אגודה אחת, they were one, ואז אין המלך יכול לשלוט להם, אין המלך can't come, he said, one, there's no one מפוזר, מפורד. So once we understand this in the Megillah, now we understand the mitzvos. What mitzvos do we have on here? Right? We have the Megillah, which you're saying. There's the Suda, Sudas that happen. Then we have the mitzvos of Mishloach Manot, Matanot Avyonim. Now, the ideas of sharing with other Jews, of giving tzedakah, are 2 very important mitzvahs, but they're practiced all year long. So why did Mordechai and Esther be kovei that Dafka and Purim have a special mitzvah? But based on what we saw here, the explanation is very clear. If the whole Yeshua, the salvation of Purim, is based on the merit of Am Yisrael reunited, strengthening their ties together in Achdos, therefore, the most appropriate way of celebrating the Chag is through the mitzvahs that unite Am Yisrael together. And that's what he writes here in the to reawaken, right? We said that every Chag we have to connect to the essence. The essence of Purim is Avas Yisrael. It's connecting to Avas Yisrael. But the Sfar Hamas takes it a step further. The mitzvah of Mishloach Manot is not just restricted to the surface, because the surface is giving food to a friend. It's not just sharing food and gashers, but in Ruchnis as well, we're meant to share with one another. And the Sfar Hamas claims that this is alluded to in the Gemara. In Megillah and Dav Zayin and Bet, and you have the source Zayin. Amar, you don't have it, source Zayin. Amar, Ana Shadri leChulia, V'yu Shadri leChurpa. He says, I gave him Chulia. Rashi says it's different Matika. I gave, right? One Chacham gives someone else something sweet, and give me back something spicy. So we understand that as food, sweet food versus spicy food. But the Sfar Hamas takes it in a different direction. If you look in Zayin, at the end of this piece, לכן אחר ישוע נקלו בעריהם ותקנו משלוח מנות ומתנות להיות אגודה אחר after ישוע, התחלנו משלוח מנות ומתנות יפים. Says the Sfar Hamas בחידש, משלוח מנות ומוכנס. והעשיר בתורה ייתן גם לדל. Someone who's wealthy in Torah has to give מתנות לביונית. Someone's wealthy in Torah has to take from his time to give from someone that is poor in Torah. Rabbi Hakotel was known for saying a person the same way as Meiser Psachim, give 10% of his money. It's tzedakah, a person has to do ma'aser tzedakah with his time. He has to give at least 10% of his time to someone that's weaker than him in learning. Talmid Chacham have to learn from one another. Each Talmid Chacham has a different thing that he's special at. One guy is a big chasham, another guy has a lot of kids, and another guy is good in kosher, another guy is good in towers, another guy is harif, another guy is matok. One guy's better in Tanakh, one guy's better in Mur. They share from one another. Each has to learn from another to come together. Like each Jew has his own special connection to Torah mitzvos, his own derech, and in Ruchnius we have to share for one another. So that's what the Sfar Hamas has to say about Purim. How does it connect to the time that we're in now? So that's the question we open up. How does it connect to the story of Pesach? So we know that Pesach is Gula. Right? It's the Gula not just of Bnei Yisrael originally when Bnei Yisrael first formed as a nation, but we know that, as we said in the Gemara Rosh Hashanah, the Nissan Nigalu, but Nissan Atidim Le'el. The last thing I just want to look in the Sfar Emet is where he writes it. Sfar Emet writes, "V'zeh haya yisod b'sheni." This whole thing is the foundation of the second Beis Hamikdash. Meaning, since this story was now being built, and we saw their mistake that they didn't come back to Israel, and there was a mistake of their perud, of their machlokes, the achdus of them coming together, the tshuva that they do, the tikkun, ends up being the yesod, the foundation of the second Beis Hamikdash, and says that sometimes that's the reason why we all know that Beis Hamikdash was destroyed because of Sinas Chinam. Why? Why was Sinas Chinam the biggest deal in the world? So if you understand that the foundation of the building is avat chinam, so if you pull out the foundations, then the building collapses. That's what he writes. Zaya yisod bayit sheni, v'lachei chravli they sinat chinam. Yisod bayit sheni, but kol havat Yisrael. Yisod bayit sheni is avos Yisrael. Okay. We're in the time where the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, but we also know that just as the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed because of sinas chinam, the way that we're going to bring it back in our generations is the exact same mistake that the people made in the time of Shushan, both in terms of not taking advantage of the opportunity and in terms of the payroll, the sinner. Now they sometimes out of frumkeit, out of hashkafa, we think we're better than this one, or better than this one, we look on these ones for not being sarcastic enough, we look on these ones for not being stark enough, we view ourselves as we're the biggest, we're the greatest, we're the sharpest, or we look down on other Jews. Chas v'shalom. That's the shot. We have to do Mashalach Manos. We have what to give to others, we have to learn from others. We need to be honest. We have to love all Jews because they're Jews. We have to Yisrael. Obviously, Yisrael is what's going to be in the Beis Hamikdash. And just like we saw in the time of Shushan, that Hashem opened the door, the people didn't walk in. Think it. In our generations, we just mentioned 70 years, it's mamish the exact same story, 70 years. There's going to be a feast. Maybe Trump's going to make the feast. Maybe Haley's going to make the feast. Someone's going to make a feast. The question is, are we going to celebrate that feast there in the UN, in New York? Are we going to come to Yerushalayim? We're Zohar, the open miracles, the foundation of the state of Israel. Hashem opened the door to the Jewish people, to Am Yisrael. He says, welcome home. Here's an opportunity to reestablish the kingdom. The Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. There was sinas chinam. Let's go. Let's rebuild the Beis Hamikdash. That's coming when we come up to Pesach. But these weeks that we have left, or 4 weeks, now there are 3 left. It's time to think about everything that went wrong. The story of Esther, the tshuva that they did, and that how that could affect us in terms of who we are today and where we want the people to be, where we want to be when we talk about Pesach. So you start thinking about Pesach and the mitzvahs of Allah Seder and the matzah and the mar. The day mitzvah is Pesach. We even call the Chai Pesach, you know, Pesach Yudel. They made mitzvahs called Pesach. You look out the window, we see the Makom of Harabayit, where we hope the Beis Hamikdash, but really to daven, but the Chazan Ha'inenu, to really be able to see, to build for the Beis Hamikdash we built, for us to be able to bring for all clients home. Those of us that are planning on, right, flying to visit our families in Chodesh. So B'ezrat Hashem, maybe the airlines let us flip the ticket instead of using the tickets to fly back there. We'll give the tickets to our families, they'll be able to fly here, be able to celebrate in New York, the Beis Hamikdash. B'ezrat Hashem. So we should be zoche to internalize this message of Purim. And as long as we do that, B'ezrat Hashem to the fullest, mechazek ourselves, understanding Jewish history, understanding the Geula, B'ezrat Hashem, the opportunities that we have, being mechazek ourselves in Amas Chinam, so B'ezrat Hashem we should be zoche to prepare ourselves by paving the road to the Chodesh of the Gemara, as the Gemara says, Nissan Yigalu, Nissan Atidin Yigel.
Would the Sfar Emet, I mean, misunderstanding from would the Sfar Emet agree to the Kuzari's assumption that even after all